How you guys doing today? Afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you're at. Good to see you all. Today we're going to do another 12 degrees of separation. I thought it was kind of fun. And it's just kind of a fun way to dig through the collection and mentally connect the pieces. So we're going to jump right in here. And today we're going to start with Kenny Clarke. And how are we going to get back to Kenny Clarke in 12 steps? This is the great Savoy 12017 Cafe Bohemia, introducing Nat Adderley to the world, Cannonball Adderley to the world, Horace Silver at a young age, Donald Byrd at a young age, Jerome Richardson and Paul Chambers. It's really an outstanding session. Kenny Clarke was a leader of a lot of the most important recordings in the late 40s and early 50s. He's just a giant. He changed how we heard the ride cymbal being played in jazz. That pulsing kind of driving sound was his trademark. It's just a great record. Has different covers to it. This would be the original. There's that great Horace Silver stride. This is just a really tough record to come by. You can get into the hundreds of dollars for a nice pressing. I was pretty thrilled when I came across this one. I enjoy this record a lot, and it's actually a fairly historically important record for Savoy. And Savoy wasn't releasing a lot of great material that's in the jazz canon in the beginning of the 12,000 series. They were mostly releasing back catalog stuff from the 40s. You know, when they had Coleman Hawkins and Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and Fats Navarro and a who's who. Their 55 stable wasn't nearly as impressive. And Herman Lubinsky was just interested in making money, and so he was reissuing all that stuff. But this slips in the mix. And I don't know if Lubinsky knew any of these guys except for maybe Kenny Clarke. You know, they're all fairly anonymous at this point. Donald Byrd's nobody at this point. Chambers is a nobody at this point. We're talking 1955. The Adderley brothers were certainly new on the scene. And so it wasn't like Lubinsky said, oh yes, I get all these great giants of the new music. He probably hesitantly said, what the fuck, go ahead guys. Go ahead Kenny, record these whatever the fuck they are, you know. And it's a seminal recording, introducing a lot of the greats that were to become the greats in the next 10 years. And it's a record definitely worth looking for, even with its other covers. And of course, I can't think of Kenny Clarke without thinking of Hank Jones. And he and Hank playing a trio together for quite a long time. And this is actually a promo copy of this. Nice. Believe it or not. And this is the Hank Jones Quartet Quintet record. And it has Donald Byrd, Eddie Jones on the bass, Kenny Clarke, and Matty Dice on the trumpet, which I have since found out is Thad Jones, Hank's brother. So you got Hank Jones, Donald Byrd, and Thad Jones with Kenny Clarke and Eddie Jones on the bass. That's some serious post-bop modernity. And it's definitely even got some hard bop leanings to it. And Savoy's on a label, you get a lot of hard bop. I don't think Lubinsky had the time for that kind of emoting, you know. But this is outstanding. Great record, incredibly modern. There's that Kenny Clarke ride cymbal that we all know so well in jazz. That was a Kenny Clarke innovation. And so these are old Savoys that one's number 12037. So it probably puts it also in 55, maybe 56. And a lot of these labels have a glut of releases in 55, 56 to the tune of 100 records those years because of the get back catalogs they were also issuing. It'd be like the music industry in 88. Sure, we're putting on a lot of new material, but we're also issuing the Beatles and the Stones and Led Zeppelin on CD. So when you were collecting CDs from 88, you were getting a lot of back catalog plus new material, which led to a lot of stuff being issued quite rapidly. And of course, another common thread here, and I'd be remiss not to go in this direction, would be Donald Byrd's first release on Savoy, number 12032. And Byrd's a young Detroit guy, comes to New York to make it. He ends up in New Jersey making this recording for Herman Lubinsky. Van Gelder produces it. It's Kenny Clarke, Dave Chambers on bass, which I'm pretty sure is Paul Chambers, Hank Jones, and Frank Foster on tenor sax. Great record. And it shows the direction of where young Byrd is going to go. He's definitely a pocket player. He's not quite the virtuosity-driven player of a Clifford Brown or Freddie Hubbard. He has a great degree of virtuosity, but he's more about the pocket. He's more about just getting into a feel and grooving pretty hard. His records with Pepper Adams are clear examples of hard bop rhythm and blues. You know, and I love Donald Byrd's discography, and it starts here on the Savoy label in 1955. And this record is, along with the Mobley stuff and the Lee Morgan record, the most expensive records in the Savoy discography by quite a long stretch. So we just mentioned Donald Byrd with Pepper Adams, and so it seemed like a nice place to go next would be to this Pepper Adams record on Regent. And this record took me a long time to track down. It's Regent number 6066, and that puts it probably 1957, 58. And Regent was a label that Lubinsky at Savoy bought out. And during the 78 era, Regent's still a fairly independent entity, kind of doing still its own material. And then as the LP era dawns, Lubinsky kind of changes the direction of Regent and makes it more a subsidiary of Savoy. And I believe it was, I don't want to call it a budget label, but I do think stuff on Regent was 50 cents less than titles on the Savoy label. And early Regent stuff, 6,000 through about 6,050, it's kind of a hodgepodge, some vocal stuff, some compilations, some live recordings from the vaults. It's about at 60-50 where Regent starts putting out some great contemporary modern jazz. So if you're out and about and you stumble on a Regent record from 6050 forward, chances are it's going to be pretty outstanding stuff and really worth digging into. And I love Pepper Adams. The guy got very few records as a leader. He does a lot of work with Donald Byrd. And he's one of the great baritone sax players that's out there. And of course, when you think of baritone sax, you think about Jerry Mulligan, and then you also think of Serge Chaloff. And this is on the Storyville label out of Boston, a small little label that was run by George Wein, if I recall correctly. And Storyville didn't have a long history. It was named after a club in Boston that hosted a lot of the great music in that city. And Boston's jazz legacy is fairly diminished compared to all the great other cities in the Northeast. If you take the 10 cities of Major League Baseball in the pre-war, pre-expansion era, Boston probably has the weakest jazz scene of all of them. And Boston, for all its democracy, constitution, all of its liberalism, all of its blue stateness, has a bad track record with blacks. And Boston seems to have its own problem with the Irish and its amalgamation of that, you know, section of the populace. But the blacks in Boston were doing even worse. And there's just not a lot of great jazz musicians, and even fewer black jazz musicians that you associate with Boston. Guys like Chick Corea, Serge Chaloff, George Wein, these are who you think of as, and they're all white. You know, there are, I think, I did see a list the other day someone shared with me of some of the Boston guys, but there's only a few black guys that are of note that call Boston home. And Boston was a very significant city in terms of sport, politics, economics. It's as important as Detroit, Philly, you know, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. You know, it's right there behind New York, Chicago, Detroit. Boston's probably there with Philadelphia in that next tier. And yet Boston just doesn't have the jazz lineage. Chaloff is part of that lineage. And he ends up going west and spending quite a bit of time up there. And on this session is the great Charlie Mariano. And so I figured I'd go there next. Because I love Charlie Mariano. He's one of my favorite white tenor, sax players. And he plays alto most of the time. But this 10-inch on Bethlehem is outstanding. It's a tough one to come by, and no one's going to give it to you. It's got this great X-ray Burt Goldblatt cover, an X-ray of a saxophone, and the band here was the Williamson brothers, Rosalino, Max Bennett, Stan Levy. It's pulsing, hard driving, beast of burden. These guys are chopping down trees and taking no prisoners. And I've recommended the West Coast Bethlehem discography a lot to people. Man, you gotta dig Charlie Mariano. And the cover is, of course, enticing in and of itself. It's a great find and not a record you can find affordably ever. Which of course leads me to Stan Levy, who plays on all those great West Coast hard driving sessions, and this record smokes. And once again, it's in that same vein with some of the same musicians. I think Rosalino, Jimmy Joffrey, Claude Williamson, Conte Condoli, Zoot Sims, Max Bennett, the great bass player. It's, on first listen, the tempo is comparable to the Blue Note Drive. And so the notion that White Cats don't play this music well is ludicrous. These kids play the shit out of it. And actually, like I've often said, the only difference would be the place they're emoting from is of course going to be somewhat different. But that's not to diminish their ability or the sound of what they're making. They're pounding it out. There's a great homage here to this jazz lineage, and they want to be part of it, and they do everything in their power with the greatest of integrity to play this music as well as they can, and they kill it. They absolutely kill it. And so that leads me to Jimmy Joffrey. And Jimmy Joffrey's an interesting player, and this record on Capitol, of all things, 534, it's very early in the LP era, and there is some real avant-garde on this record. There's some real dissonance, experimental playing. They really dive into some of the edges. And I remember listening to it for the first time, almost enthralled, as much as I was shocked at the fact that this was on Capitol this early in the game. It's very modern pieces, very ahead of its time, and honestly, in 55, there's not really a whole lot else out there that you can really stake a claim to compare to these tangents. That's edgy. There's tempo shifts. It's just a really great record, and definitely a solid part of the jazz kingdom, and deserves a little more recognition than it gets. And of course, if you're going to talk Jimmy Joffrey, Sonny Stitt, the lone wolf as he was known, does a record playing Jimmy Joffrey arrangements. And in a really fun kind of twist, Joffrey ends up joining them on a couple of blues numbers at the end of this record. This is a great record on the Verve label, 8309. Probably puts it about 1960, 1959. Really great stuff. I'm not sure if the band is listed here. Sonny Stitt, Jack Sheldon, Frank Rosalino, Lee Katzman, Jimmy Rawls, Kenny Clarke, Lawrence Marble. Great stuff. And Sonny is one of the most underappreciated guys in modern jazz. So many people just don't seem to value Sonny Stitt, and I think he's a victim of the same thing that who did I just do my episode on yesterday? He wasn't on the right labels. Dizzy Gillespie. He wasn't on the right labels, and so he kind of gets passed over. He kind of gets ignored. So yeah, Sonny Stitt is really underappreciated. My phone died there, sorry. Sonny Stitt's a really underappreciated guy. I did a great episode on his discography. It's absolutely massive. But because it wasn't on Blue Note, it wasn't on Prestige in the classic period, he gets kind of dismissed by today's collector. And much like Dizzy Gillespie, even though he has great records on the Verve label, on the Argo label, most collectors today are just buying what the marketing machine's telling them to buy. Blue Note, Miles Davis Associates, you know, it's very limited. And so Sonny Stitt has this great patchwork of albums that are just outstanding. And his stuff on the Verve label, you know, the hard swing, the blues, all those records are just outstanding records with outstanding players behind them. Norman Granz doesn't really record shitty shit. It's all pretty outstanding. This is a great record, playing Jimmy Joffrey. Like I said, Joffrey joins him at the end. And so when you're thinking of these guys, it leads you to Jimmy Joffrey here, playing with Sonny Stitt, sorry. And here he is. And this is also outstanding, Sonny Stitt with young Max Roach on the drums. And I believe Bud Powell is also on some of these tracks. And when you have Bud Powell with Max Roach, with Sonny Stitt, that's some pretty serious jazz royalty. You know, of the highest of level. And by the way, I'm wearing a World Be Free jersey. His name was Lloyd Free, and he changed his name legally to World Be Free. Great player from the 70s, played with the 76ers and with the Cavaliers, of course, in the 80s. It's one of the great names of all time. And so when Mehmet World Peace coined that name, it wasn't like, oh, you're just kind of, that's been done. But this is a great record. This is early stuff by Stitt on Prestige that was probably recorded in 50, 51, 52, and then put out in the 7000 series, 70, 24, and probably 55, 56. And Max Roach is driving this session. And Max Roach is just one of the great drummers of this era. So that leads us to Max Roach. And this is one of his records with Booker Little after the great Clifford Brown passed. And I love this record. I love this record. It's just so driven. And I feel that way about a lot of the Max Roach, Emerson Mercury stuff. It's a fire that's hot. And you get a blue fire, and then you get a blue flame fire. And I don't think you get to play with Max Roach without turning the heat up. You ain't a brown dwarf. I mean, you a white neutron star. You gotta shine. You gotta illuminate. You gotta bring that fire. And Max Roach was also a wonderful part of the birth of the cool. And it's a record we've talked about on numerous occasions. But Roach was one of many guys that were very important parts of this recording. And I think it's shameful how much it's been just kind of credited as a Miles Davis record, and more, everyone just thinks, oh, Miles Davis, Birth of the Cool. How about Jerry Mulligan, Birth of the Cool? How about Lee Konitz? How about J.J. Johnson? How about John Lewis? How about Max Roach? How about Kenny Clarke? And these three different sessions that make up Birth of the Cool, they had kind of a rotating band for some of the sessions. Of course, Miles is on all three sessions with a couple other guys, but it's certainly not a Miles creation, and it doesn't deserve to be spoken of in that light. And so how do we get back to Kenny Clarke? Well, the Birth of the Cool brings us right back to Kenny Clarke. And here's another Savoy, Kenny Clarke and Ernie Wilkins, number 12,007. And so this is recorded in this moment, not a reissue of earlier stuff. And so number 7 in the Savoy 12,000 series is a fine record with the fantastic Ernie Wilkins, Kenny Clarke, I think Cecil Payne's on the baritone, Hank Jones on the piano, Wendell Marshall's on the bass, George Barrow's on the tenor, Eddie Burt's on the trombone, fantastic trombone player, and Van Gelder is engineering this, was supervised by Ozzy Cadena. It's outstanding, and it's on par with early 1500 Blue Note. It's better than a lot of the early 7000 Prestige. This is right there in terms of the black expression of sorrow into finding that joy. And I love these old Savoys. Horrible covers, yet wonderful in the same way, because they're very linked to the age they're from. You know, you look at a Reed Miles, and you don't really have a finger on when that was made. But you look at a Savoy album cover, and oh yeah, that was probably made in the 50s. That being said, I love it. You know, the monotone color, and I said this before, but to all collectors out there, anything that's monochromatic and Savoy 12,050 and under, if it's a 12,050 and under with a color photo, that's a reissue. Always. All the original Savoys from 12,000 through about 12,057 or so are black and white or monochromatic like this. And it's a great way to know the pressing right off from what you're buying. Is this a first pressing? Is it a black and white cover? And sometimes there's a second pressing on the black and white cover, but Lubinsky updated his cover sometimes 2 and 3 times because there was new modern things, or new modern techniques have become more affordable, so they'll add some color fonts, and then they'll put a color photograph of a gal drinking wine or something, like they do for Al Garner. The covers are just bad. A lot of times they put a new cover on that's worse than the original 2-tone cover. That's Lubinsky making money over anything else. In spite of it, the young brothers that he sneered at and treated poorly, they make some fantastic music under that supervision. And sometimes when you got a guy with a whip being a cruel taskmaster, it actually gives you a little extra go fuck yourself in your playing. And I do hear that on some of these early Savoys. It's weird though, because it does seem like Lubinsky takes the Parker era stuff more serious. And the Parker stuff, if anything, was more innovative and hard to get. And I think it's partly because I think it was a Teddy Reed. There's a few other guys that were part of that Parker era Savoy that were probably help steering the ship. And those guys leave Lubinsky to his own self here. And he's a guy I'd like to actually sit down with and chat. As douchey as Lubinsky sounds, I'd like to get a grip into his head. And obviously some of it's just a product of the times he was a part of. You know, but that being said, it's a proud legacy Savoy, even with its ugly covers. You know, and they're the toughest label to find of the big New York labels. And by big, I mean the big New York jazz independent labels. You have your Blue Note, Riverside, Prestige, Atlantic, Bethlehem, Savoy. You know, all those labels. Verve's kind of New York, kind of West Coast at the same time. And I think of New York I think of Verve as a bit of a separate entity, actually. But Savoy is fun to collect. And you should never pass up an old Savoy, even if you've never heard of it. It's just a cool piece of history. And it does slot itself in to this entire story, as all jazz records eventually do. It's a long, winding, wonderful narrative of a people coming out of captivity, voicing freedom, struggling to make their way, still dealing with oppression, but somehow this music is the burning bush that leads them out. And they find their way into this new land. And a lot of what was promised obviously was not given as it should have been, but it's great stuff. So that's Kenny Clarke, 12 Steps Back to Kenny Clarke. Hope you enjoyed that. It's kind of fun just doing these. I'll continue to do them once in a while. They don't take a lot of work and research like some episodes do, so I try to balance that. The ones where I gotta do 2 hours of homework, pulling records from all over the shelves and finding all the side sessions and albums. This is just pull 12 records that I connect mentally real quickly. And I'm like, oh yeah, this, that, back to this. And so they're fun to do for me as well. Y'all have a great day. Be safe. Be blessed. Jack Shepard says peace.